11. It's a squared-on shot. There's not a lot of lead-in on the ground level. The sky is kind of washed out, and it's not that sharp.
Through the fence.
Interesting angle, has some natural framing effect with the fence itself. I guess I forgot to give it a score. 13. Decent sky in the background, some cirrus clouds, and the colors are nice with the orange and the blue.
Can you hear him in the back?
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Want me to turn that up a little bit?
Nope.
It's good? Okay. Bold Rock.
13. This one's messing with my mind, and I didn't even have to buy street drugs for it. That's a great, great geometric image. It's got some interesting texture and line in it. It's a very cool shot. Interesting take on a barn.
Abandoned.
There's a lot of uninteresting foreground. The composition beyond the foreground is rather nice with the high trees leading a diagonal line down towards the barn, and the clouds are very interesting.
Corn harvest going into the silo of the barn.
On a Thursday.
10 o'clock.
At 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
15. It's got nice pastel-y colors. It tells a story. It's an interesting scene with a horse-drawn wagon, a little nostalgia. Pretty sky. The branch leading in from the upper left, pointing at the silo, gives it a nice sweep and a great line into the scene. Very nice.
At the cliff bottom.
$14. It's got beautiful color and texture. The green is vibrant. The orange complements it well. The waterfall in the background is a nice accent. Gives it some depth and dimension. The sky's a little bit uninteresting, I guess, would be the one point detraction.
Country scene.
$13. It's got great texture, great sharpness, nice color. Once again, the foreground takes up a lot of the frame, and even though the dappled leaves are kind of pretty, it kind of takes your eye more than the barn itself as an assigned subject. A little bit of a longer exposure. The clouds have some nice texture in them. It's a pretty scene.
Day is done. It's spotlighted nice on the barn. That's an interesting way to view and edit the assigned subject. There's a lot of just the heavy darkness on the right. It's just featureless. This guy has a little bit of interest. Once again, the barn is kind of distant, and all around it is it doesn't add a lot to the barn itself, the rest of the composition.
I want you to know that the screen is a lot darker tonight than what I'm seeing on the computer here.
How come?
I
How come?
don't know.
Projectionist?
My
How
eyes
come?
are, but at any rate, those trees show up on the,
They do.
yeah,
Oh, I give it another point then. How's that?
okay.
And often the screen's brighter than everybody
Yeah.
expects it to be, so.
Yeah.
I kind of compensate in my mind a little bit that way too.
Is the projector in focus?
I-
Okay. Wondered if it was in focus.
Yeah, it's autofocus. Weathering the Years, Century Barn.
12, there's nice texture in the barn. It's heavily vignetted, and slight vignetting to bring your eye into the center is helpful, but it's a heavy darkness in the corners, once again, maybe a little bit because of the projector. It's a decent straight-on shot of a weathered barn.
That Barn on Heidler Road.
It's a beautiful scene. It's nicely textured. There's the barn itself is a little bit diminished in the scene. Maybe cropping a little bit in like this, and making the barn more prominent as an assigned subject and as a focal point and the main subject in the image. There's a lot, it's beautiful, there's a lot going on. The barn is a small part of the scene.
Barn,
No lie. How do you score something like this? I don't know. 13 for whimsy. It's fun. It's very interesting. It's a cool shot.
Should have seen the other one.
oh,
Oh.
Jensen's Barn.
15 vibrant colors. The subject is strong. You know, the barn is the subject. The text sign's got the beautiful colors in it. The cows are out in it. It tells a complete story. The sky behind it's beautiful. Gorgeous shot.
Inside the Old Barn.
13, it's got nice lighting, nice textures, a lot going on. It's a rather busy scene. Your eye doesn't really land on anything as a starting point or ending point. It's just got a little much going on. Nice lighting, nice textures.
Autumn's in the Air.
Great impact with the orange pumpkins in the foreground. Sky's gorgeous, barn's weathered, and the texture's nice on it. Late fall scene. Nice photograph.
Red Barn, Mackey Hill Road.
It's a nice shot with the vibrant red and the blue sky as a complementary color. The house, the fence, there's some distractions in the scene, but it's a nice midday shot. Good, well exposed for this time of day.
Hazy Morning.
There's a lot of sky and a lot of empty negative space in the upper right-hand corner of the frame. A little tighter shot with the barn and just a few of the hay rolls would probably make it a little stronger.
Harvest on the farm.
Unless there's something in my eyes or the projector, it's just, there's nothing that seems to be sharp enough or crisp enough in this scene. It's an interesting story being told. Right away I try to focus my eyes, and it seems like all the focal planes in it are a little bit soft.
Barn in the mountains.
It's got a nice leading line coming right down into the barn there. Diagonals are always nice in a photograph like that, leading right into the subject. Beautiful lighting, interesting sky. Very nice shot.
Working barn.
The foreground's not as dark as it looks. That center foreground.
Okay. 12, it looks kind of industrial. The light vignetting it takes your eyes out into the corners and away from the subject and the scene. Your eye always wants to go to the lighter portions, brighter portions of an image, and to have your eye taken up, particularly to the upper corners, kind of detracts from it.
Autumn in Vermont.
13. It's a nice composition, and it's just nuked in Photoshop. It's oversaturated to be a natural-looking color and lighting for this time of year, but it's not nuked enough to be a complete abstracted kind of a scene. It's kind of in the middle. Yeah, the saturation's a little heavy. It's such beautiful colors.
Saturation's not bad on the screen.
Let's not talk about it.
All right.
I gotta judge him.
Right?
I
We
gotta
have to judge what he sees.
call him as I
Alright.
sees him. As it appears on the screen, it seems to be a little oversaturated.
Laundry day.
Hands over there.
12. It's a neat story. It's an interesting photograph, but it doesn't have a great deal of impact.
Red barn with grapes.
It's a perfect composition. The balance in it, the colors, it's sharp. It's got texture. It's a very well composed and well executed shot. It's a beautiful scene.
Red barn.
It's nicely composed. Once again, it's just kind of awfully stylized. Heavy editing. It's a nice natural scene with nice natural colors.
Silo sunset.
The sky's beautiful. The silos are somewhat dynamic. The frame's cut in half, makes it a little static. Most of the photograph, most of where your eye goes is to the stand of corn in the foreground. Recomposing taking advantage of that beautiful sky and making the silos in the barn a little more prominent, made it a little more powerful.
Bump out barn.
The barn itself is kind of obscured with the bare tree limbs coming in from the left and evergreen limbs coming in from the right. It's a very washed out, uninteresting sky. It's nice in the composition. You're not looking at it flat-sided. The road in the front does have a diagonal line going in, but to portray a barn, it is kind of obscured and the sky is kind of washed out.
A well-kept barn.
It's got beautiful tinting and the editing lends itself well to the barn itself, the texture, the vintage of the building. It has some nostalgia and the tinting makes it's nicely edited.
The red shutter.
It's a great composition, and the red shutter with the blue sky and the white barn are great. It doesn't have huge impact, but it's a great composition, and it's got great texture, and it's well exposed. It's a very nice shot.
Moonlit footsteps.
The footsteps are the best part of the photograph. The barn is, I don't know, maybe the screen again, but once again, just detailless, and as a silhouette, it isn't that powerful. I guess that's the moon that's kind of blown out a little bit there, but it's an interesting concept. It's a good composition, but there's just that huge black area for the barn without a real dynamic silhouette. Sky's cool, backlit snowflakes, got some interesting aspects to it.
Octagon, 1879 octagon barn. See the face?
12, it is an interesting face. It is nicely done in black and white. It's straight on. There's no real story being told. It's a good editorial shot.
Country barn.
It's got a tremendous series of layers going back through your items from one the foreground, the middle ground, the background, and the sky. It's got some sweep to it. It's beautifully exposed, nice texture, soft greens, good contrast in the sky. Nice shot.
Colors of nature and man.
It's the yellow is so bright and so dominant in the scene that it's hard to get back into the barn itself. Once again, as an assigned subject, it's a beautiful field and kind of a nice setting, but the yellow is harsh and domineering in the photograph.
Late autumn skies.
13, it's a fabulous composition, and it's a beautiful scene, and the lighting is nice. Right away, the colors, it's just, it's a saturation kind of a thing, and the oversaturation, the natural colors are so nice. And then to just tweak it a little further like this, especially for a natural scene, a natural setting, it takes my eye into that oversaturated area and away from a really great composition and nice lighting.
Brace yourself.
Solid shot, nice lines, triangles. The geometry is pleasing. Texture in the straw, and as you start there and lead up through the scene, it does lose sharpness in the background to enough of an extent it's a little bit distracting. A nice take on the inside of the barn, and the texture is in there.
Vineyard in late summer.
Is a midday shot. Light is uninteresting. It's dropped a little bit tight in the upper left-hand corner. The tree grows out of the frame, and it takes your eye a little bit up and out. And the foreground, particularly in the lower right, is uninteresting. It's a neat building, and the barrels are whatever they are there. It's again part of an interesting subject.
In the country.
It's got a heavy HDR look to it anyway. Muted colors, gray sky, the tinting, the coloration is interesting in it. Often in a foreground like this with the fence and the weeds going right across the front of the frame, as opposed to having a fence or a natural feature that would be leading in towards the barn, it's almost like a hurdle for your eye to get over with a heavy foreground like this one. It kind of stops your eye, and then you have to make a leap rather than having your eye led into a scene.
Seen better days.
It's once again I get this just heavy line of the weeds across the front. The structure is kind of diminished in the background. It does have a leading line with some of the other debris coming in from the lower right, leading your eye back into the barn. A little bit of a leading line there, but it's still it's a leap to get back into the scene.
Horse barn.
And it's just it's harsh light, just real harsh shadows. The piece of material that's here is a distraction in the scene. There's just a lot of dark area in the barn, and then kind of a bright, uninteresting sky. The horse right there is pretty cool. There's a lot more going on beyond that. That's
Fall vibes in the country.
oven, I don't know if it's an effect or if it's just all a little bit out of focus. I suspect it's been softened in editing, but it's not enough to be an effective technique, and it's too much to just have the crispness of a natural scene.
Between undulated clouds and undulated road.
13, once again, just, see, I don't know if the intent is to mute or soften the image. It's just, there's nothing sharp, and it's not abstracted enough to make it certain that it was really softened for the effect. It's kind of in between. There's just nothing sharp.
Red barn with many windows.
12, this one's sharp. It's got some interesting lines in it. It's just got a killer light, midday, harsh white, harsh shadows. Different time of day, it would be fantastic. But just a midday light, tough to do much with.
The red barn on the hill.
14, it's just beautiful texture in the snow. The barn is sharp and still a little bit muted. Enough blue in the sky to set off the red of the barn. The barn is framed in by the trees but not obscured by them. It's a beautiful shot.
Barn of vines.
12, it has beautiful texture in it. It's a decent angle on the barn. Seems like the frame could use a little more space to breathe. It's ponderous in the composition. Once again, it's just a real soft light early in the day, late in the day. It would show off the texture of the ivy and the barn and the foliage a little bit better. Tough light.
Barn. Barn with cherries. Not yet. Barn with apples. Barn with red fruit.
Well, it's definitely a barn, we've decided, so, and it's very red. 13, colors are vibrant, you're getting right on the edge of being a little too much so, but not so much to detract from the scene. It's fairly nicely framed in the main part of the barn. The sky's at least gray and not that terrible washed out white. Nice scene.
Grace Farm.
12, it's a nice composition, having people in there in the foreground, in the barn in the background. But right away, the subject separation, when you have a prominent subject in a scene, if they had been moved just a little bit to the left, and their silhouettes could have been cleaner, I think it would have made the image much more powerful. And once again, I keep looking, it just looks like the folks there aren't sharp. Maybe he looks a little sharper, maybe she was moving in the scene. But yeah, don't be afraid to move the subjects around in a situation like this, and put your camera high and low and back and forth and move them. And but yeah, when you
have something like this, you want a clean outline, a clean silhouette on your subject.
Haunted barn.
It's kind of interesting structure. This photograph shows the dilapidated state well. It's straight on, sideways. The foreground's uninteresting, as is the sky. Different lighting. Get a little more focused in on the barn and the textures, and it could be improved. Lighting's tough. Sky's tough.
Route 27 barn.
It's an interesting composition, the way the maker has positioned the barn and diminished the sky. The sky's interesting here too, but it's made to be a very small part of the scene. The composition was thought out a little bit here. Got the ramp leading up, brings your eye into the main subject. Nicely composed.
Morning at the barn.
It's a nice shot in that all of the lighting is even. There's some warm light coming in from the early morning sun apparently. The leading lines go up into the window. Makes you wonder what's going on inside. Nice tight shot.
Just an old barn.
The title's fitting. It does come across as just an old structure in a wooded setting. It's a decent tonal range. The leaves over here are out of focus and a little bit of a distraction.
1913 dairy barn.
It's nicely composed. Somebody's thought enough to get that pop of Patty Rado red into the composition. The yellow and the blue, the cloud in the sky. It's what you would call Chamber of Commerce photography with such a bluebird day. But it's so much nicer than those skies that are washed out. Blue sky, puffy clouds, it can work. It's a nice sweep up into the barn. Once again, it could breathe a little bit. It's a little tight, and weather vane, I would guess, kind of takes your eye up and out.
Gentleman farmer's farm.
And that is a contradiction in terms, gentleman farmer. I can say that because I'm a farmer.
Yes.
It's nice muted colors, pastel-y looking, painterly. There's so much uninteresting in the foreground, composed a little bit differently and making that barn and the leaves and the sky a little more prominent. A lot of the frame is just it's kind of wasted in the excessive foreground, perhaps.
A red barn in fall.
13, well composed, colors are bright, not really overdone. It shows the barn in fall setting nicely.
A family of barn boots.
It's a great shot. It's got some thought in it. It's a really different take on the subject and the theme. I like how they're lined up and go right down in size. Texture in the wood shows well lit. Great concept. Very different.
In the Old West.
15, it's HDR'd for sure, but a good photo is a good photo, or it's heavily edited to have that effect. But look, great texture in the sky. The barn is clearly the main subject. The lighting's beautiful on every area in the frame. Nice clean image. Fantastic sharpness. Nice.
The Barn in the Valley.
And once again I've got a column as I see it. It's just so heavily dark in the background. I'm sorry, it's got a little more detail up there. It's a beautiful subject. The white and the red are crisp and nice. There's a lot up in this corner that doesn't add a lot to it. I wonder if recomposing closer and lower to the lane leading up to the barn and using that as an even enhanced leading line would have been fun to try. But yeah, just it's heavy darkness.
Amish Barn. It's straight on. There's no dynamic lines. It's sharp. The tonal range is nice for a black and white. Once again, it's appropriate for the subject. The buggy is a nice kicker. It does add to the composition and the story of that scene. Horse Barn.
Here's another interesting take, somewhat like the boots, a little different. Compositional eye, using the barn as a leading line to the horse. This guy's bright and featureless, but it has been diminished in the frame. It's a little tight with the horse there, a little more breathing space may be helpful, but it's a good eye. Somebody got up close, wide angle, different. Great because of that.
Barn at Sunset.
The lighting is much better than many of the photographs at sunset. You can see the soft, warm light sweeping in from the left. There's an awful lot of just out of focus area. The barn is a little bit soft too, but the whole foreground is soft. Just watch your depth of field, but timing was good. Light's starting to get nice there.
Our winner in bronze is Christine French with the Red Barn with Grapes. In silver, our winner is Jan Balsamo with
14.
Autumns in the Air, and also Dairy Barn by Richard Lipchick. In gold, we have Barn in the Mountains by Del Becker. In diamond, our winner is Nancy Rowe with A Well-Kept Barn. Also, Country Barn by Candy Felucci. And The Red Barn on the Hill by Chuck Garrett. Platinum, our winners are Patty Menz with Corn Harvest. Judson's Farm by Tracy Dorsch. The Old West by Becky Blair.